Most neighborhoods have their fair share of nosy neighbors, but ours? We had something worse, an HOA patrol squad. They weren't police, they weren't security guards, and they sure weren't welcome on our land. Yet they strutted around, like they owned the county, writing tickets, snapping pictures, and threatening anyone who didn't bow to their rules. Now here's the kicker. We didn't even live inside their HOA. Our family farm had been there since before the subdivision. Was even dreamed up. Grandpa always joked, "We were here before the ink on their covenants, and we'll be here long after their pool closes for good." But apparently, that didn't matter to Karen, the self-appointed commander of the HOA patrol. It started with letters. First, they claimed our fence was too tall. Then they said the tractor parked near the barn was an eyesore. We ignored them, because legally they had no say over our land. But ignoring Karen only made her angrier. Soon the letters turned into threats, and the threats turned into unannounced visits. One Saturday morning, Grandpa caught them in the act. He stepped outside to see two men in matching HOA polos, clipboard in one hand, phone camera in the other, climbing over our fence like they had every right to be there. Grandpa didn't yell, he didn't even raise his cane. He just stood there on the porch, sipping his coffee, watching them struggle to balance on the top rail. When they finally dropped down into the yard, they spotted him. "We're here to inspect the property," one said, puffing his chest like he was a deputy. Grandpa just chuckled. "Son, the only thing you're going to inspect is how fast you can climb back over that fence." They didn't leave. In fact, one of them pulled out a folded HOA rule sheet, waving it in the air like it was a warrant. Grandpa finished his coffee, set the mug down, and walked inside without another word. That night, he went into the shed, pulled out a box of tools, a spool of heavy wire and his old electrician's gloves. He had a plan. "If they like climbing fences so much," he said with a grin, "let's see how they feel about a little shock therapy." The next morning, the gate looked the same to everyone else, but Grandpa had run a low-voltage line through it, perfectly safe, perfectly legal, but just enough to make anyone thinking of trespassing think twice, and wouldn't you know it? It didn't take long before Karen's patrol tried their stunt again. It was just a matter of days before the patrol came snooping again. They thought we wouldn't notice the white SUV parked down the road, or the way the same two men in HOA polos crept along the fence line with cameras dangling from their necks. But Grandpa noticed. He always noticed. From the porch, he leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Watch this." Sure enough, one of the men jogged up to the gate. He grabbed the top rail to hoist himself over. Then it happened. A sharp crack of static snapped through the air, followed by a startled yelp. He flinched back like he'd touched a hornet's nest. His partner laughed, thinking it was just clumsiness, until he tried the latch himself. Zap. Another shout. This time louder. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Grandpa didn't even smirk. He just kept his eyes on them, calm as ever, while the patrol scrambled and cursed, shaking their hands out. One of them shouted across the yard, "You can't do this. This is harassment." Grandpa stood, walked slowly to the gate, and rested one hand on the wooden post, not the wire. "This here is private property," he said in that low, steady voice of his. "You climb over it, that's trespassing. You grab the gate, well, that's on you. Don't like it? Stay off." They stormed off red-faced, but I knew Karen wouldn't let it end there. And I was right. By sundown, a letter was taped to our mailbox in big, bold print. "Notice of violation, electrical hazard." Grandpa read it out loud at the kitchen table, shaking his head. "Hazard? It's safer than the toaster your grandma makes waffles with." He tossed the letter in the wood stove, watched it curl up in flames, and said, "Mark my words, they'll be back with more than just their little clipboard army." And they were. 2 days later, we woke up to pounding on the front door. This time it wasn't just patrol, it was Karen herself, flanked by 3 HOA board members. She was red in the face, barking like a drill sergeant, demanding Grandpa dismantle the electric gate immediately. "It's dangerous, it's unlawful. You'll be fined thousands for this." Grandpa calmly poured himself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Ma'am, the only unlawful thing happening here is you standing on my porch without permission. And as for fines, last I checked, your HOA doesn't write the laws around here. You don't even have jurisdiction on this land. Karen's jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that," she hissed, before storming off. But Grandpa knew something bigger was coming. He could feel it. The patrol's bruised egos, Karen's fury, and the embarrassment of being zapped on private property. It wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. That night, while the crickets chirped outside and the cicadas buzzed in the trees, Grandpa sat on the porch, polishing his old lantern. "They think the gate shocked 'em," he said with a sly grin. "They ain't seen nothing yet." Karen didn't just stew in silence. When her patrol got zapped and her board members were humiliated, she decided to turn it into a campaign. Flyers appeared all over town accusing Grandpa of endangering children and running a rogue electrical hazard on his property. She even called the county office trying to file complaints. But what Karen didn't realize was that Grandpa wasn't just some cranky old farmer with a few tools. He'd spent 30 years as a county electrical inspector. If anyone knew what was legal, safe, and foolproof, it was him. And Karen was about to learn that the hard way. The following Saturday, Karen returned with reinforcements. This time she didn't bring her little clipboard patrol. She brought 2 uniformed security contractors in black SUVs. They stepped out wearing tactical vests, radios buzzing, and one even carried a baton at his side like he was preparing for a raid. The whole display was clearly meant to intimidate. Grandpa saw it from the porch and muttered, "Well, they finally brought in the cavalry." Karen shouted across the yard, "This is your last warning. Remove the electrified gate or we'll take it down ourselves." Grandpa walked out to the fence line, slow and deliberate. He stopped just behind the gate, resting one hand on the SIA wood post again. "Ma'am, you touch this gate, you'll be the one breaking the law. And those men you brought." He squinted at their uniforms. "They're not deputies. They don't have any legal authority on my land." One of the hired men stepped forward anyway, baton in hand. "We're here to make sure the HOA's orders." Jia followed. That's when Grandpa let out a laugh. Not a chuckle, but a full belly laugh. "The HOA's orders? Son, this isn't their playground. This is my property. And let me tell you something. The law is already on my side." Before anyone could react, Grandpa reached behind the gatepost and flipped a hidden switch. Suddenly, floodlights blazed to life across the yard, illuminating every corner of the fence line. A loud clank followed as the secondary lock system engaged, making the gate impossible to open without the right key. Karen's face went pale in the glare. "Haru can't do this," she shrieked. Grandpa pointed at the 2 contractors. "Boys, you've been duped. This woman doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. You try stepping over this fence, you'll be the ones trespassing. And I guarantee the sheriff won't be too kind to hired muscle-playing dress-up." The 2 men exchanged nervous glances. One muttered, "We were told this was HOA jurisdiction." But as Grandpa leveled his gaze at them, they backed away. Karen screamed, "After them! Don't you dare walk away! You work for me!" But it was too late. Her backup was gone, leaving her standing alone at the gate, shaking with rage. Grandpa leaned closer, his voice low but sharp. "You think you can bully me with phony authority? Next time you send people onto my land, it won't just be a zap from the gate. It'll be the sheriff hauling you away." Karen didn't reply. She turned red-faced and stomped back to her car, but everyone knew she wasn't finished yet. The war between Grandpa and the HOA was about to reach its breaking point. Karen's rage had officially boiled over. After her patrol got shocked, after her flyers flopped, and after her security contractors abandoned her in the floodlights, she knew she had one card left to play: call in the county sheriff. But here's what Karen didn't know. Grandpa wasn't just some grumpy old man with a toolbox. He was a man with deep roots in the county. He'd inspected half the electrical systems in town, done work for the fire department, and even trained deputies on electrical hazards back in the day. The sheriff? Let's just say he'd known Grandpa since high school. Still, Karen marched into the county office the next Monday, ranting and raving like she was leading a crusade. "That man is a menace," she shrieked. "He's booby-trapping fences. He's endangering families. He's practically a terrorist." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and asked flatly, "You got any proof of that?" Karen slapped down photos of the fence, the gate, even the floodlights. But the sheriff recognized Grandpa's craftsmanship immediately. Looks like a clean, low-voltage deterrent system. Perfectly legal. That wasn't the answer Karen wanted. She puffed up, jabbed a finger at the desk, and threatened, "Then I'll handle it myself. If you won't stop him, I'll bring in the county board, the mayor, whoever I have to." Word of her tantrum spread fast. By Wednesday, the whole town was buzzing with gossip about Karen's vendetta against Grandpa, and by Friday, she made her final, desperate move. Just after sundown, headlights swung into the gravel drive. Karen stepped out of her SUV with a crowbar in her hand. Behind her, she dragged 3 more HOA board members, each holding tools of their own. They weren't here to talk. They were here to tear the gate down. Grandpa saw it from his porch. Calm. As ever, he stood, straightened his cap, and walked down to the yard. "Evening, folks," he called out. "You're a long way from your cul-de-sac." Karen snarled, "This ends tonight. Either you take this gate down or we do." She lifted the crowbar like she meant it. Grandpa didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped a number already on speed. "Dial." Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed across the property as 2 county cruisers rolled up the drive. The deputies stepped out, hands resting on their belts. "Evening, Mr. Hayes," one said to Grandpa. "We got your call." Karen spun around, furious. "Finally, arrest him. He's the one breaking the law." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, Mr. Hayes hasn't broken any laws, but you?" He glanced at the crowbar, the trespassing line, and the damage already done to the fence. "You and your friends are in a heap of trouble," Karen sputtered. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." The other deputy shook his head. "Ma'am, the HOA doesn't give you jurisdiction on private property. You crossed the line, literally." Grandpa folded his arms, watching silently as the deputies disarmed the group, took statements, and loaded them into the cruisers. For the first time in weeks, the yard was quiet again. Karen's war was over. The next morning, the farm was calm. Birds sang, the sun cut across the fields, and for the first time in weeks, Grandpa could drink his coffee on the porch without the sound of strangers rustling at the fence line. Karen and her crew spent the weekend cooling their heels in county lockup. The deputies made it clear. Charges were pending for trespassing, attempted property damage, and in Karen's case, incitement. The HOA board, humiliated, quickly scrambled to distance themselves. By Monday, neighbors who once whispered about Grandpa were shaking their heads at Karen instead, and that was the thing. Karen thought she was powerful because she had an HOA title, a clipboard, and a group of followers. But when the law showed up, all of that crumbled like wet paper. In the end, Grandpa hadn't needed to raise a hand. He just let Karen dig her own hole, and she fell right in. The county sheriff even stopped by later that week, chuckling as he stood at the gate Karen had tried to tear down. "She didn't know who she was messing with," he said. "Half the county owes you for wiring their houses. You've got more respect here than that HOA ever will." Grandpa just grinned, tapping the top of the gate with his cane. "People like that forget something important," he said. "You can't bully someone who doesn't play your game. They wanted control. But out here, this land, this fence, this family, it's ours. Always has been. Always will be." Word spread fast about what had happened. Some folks stopped by just to shake Grandpa's hand. Others laughed about Karen's meltdown at the county office. And the HOA? They never set foot near the farm again. Karen's patrol was disbanded, her reputation shattered. A woman who once strutted around giving orders couldn't even get her own neighbors to look her in the eye anymore. It turned out the only thing she managed to lead was herself into disaster. As for Grandpa, he went back to his routine, fixing tractors, tending the fields, and tinkering in his shed. The gate stayed electrified, not out of spite, but as a reminder that boundaries matter, that respect matters, and that when someone crosses the line, sometimes the best defense is as simple as standing your ground. Grandpa always said, "You don't have to shout to prove a point. Sometimes a quiet fence with a little spark does all the talking." And in the end, that fence didn't just protect the farm, it protected our family's peace. Karen never came back. And Grandpa. He just poured another cup of coffee, content with the silence. And that's how Karen's war against our family ended, with her in handcuffs and Grandpa sipping coffee like nothing ever happened. Some people never learn. You can't bully the E. Wrong person on the wrong land. If you love this story, hit that like button. It tells us you want more HOA takedowns. Subscribe to HOA Karen Stories and turn on the bell so you never miss the next wild showdown. And drop a comment below. What would you have done if Karen's patrol climbed your fence? Because trust me, the next story, it's even crazier.